Hi, everyone. My name is Hamid. I'm an addict. I'm from Kuwait. And thank you guys for having us. Jack is with me today. So we'll be going over the cat. So before we start, is there like any particular order? Do you want to do this, or do you want to go through the PowerPoint? So the PowerPoint was released yesterday.
Do we have it out, Hamid? Because I thought earlier it wasn't proved.
Yeah, it's not proof.
Okay. And do you want to stick with, I think, what we talked about, Hamid and I? You're going to see a lot of us this weekend. You've got Michael, Irene, Paul, Hamid, and I all participating. And I think, Hamid, if we're still on the same page, what we talked about doing, because the cat, it's a little different than the car. Like some of the cat discussion may not even be on the cat motions, right? It's like, what's relating to the cat. So we had talked about, we know, wasn't it one thing we knew there would be some questions about the seating. And if my memory serves, I think what we were going to do is say hi, tell you we're glad to be here. And then Hamid's going to kind of talk about the seating report, what will happen there. And then I think we wanted to open it up to questions about the cat that aren't in the motions, and then go through the motions. And yeah, and if that PowerPoint's working on the motions, Hamid, that'd be great. And there's someone there to help us if we need that. But yeah, would that agenda seem okay to you guys?
Yeah.
Great. I would say, Hamid, take it away, and let's start with the seating portion of the cat. And whatever discussion we need about that, then we're going to kind of open it up for stuff that's not in the motions and go through the motions.
Okay, perfect. So as everyone has seen in the CAT, there have been 5 regions that have applied for conference seating, and before the deadline, that's Brazil, Central, Iran, region number 1, Nordeste region, Brazil, Rio Grande do Sul, and Thailand. And as you might have heard before, the work group that is comprised of 2 world board members and 4 regional delegates that were asked to participate. So the world board members are Irene and Michael, and the delegates were Des, Emilio, Keith, and Scott. I'm pretty sure I didn't forget or say anyone's name correctly. And that's basically the process. They go through everything that is required, and they actually sit down and they meet a couple of times and they discuss every request. And so I'll just give you a brief. So as individual, we discussed these, and as individual board members, we all had different perspectives on some of the applications. But what we do agree on is that, that we are trying to operate of what some would say is a broken system. And we would like to, stop and maybe, have the time to talk about more, how the seating process could be better revised. And what we call as, seating criteria is really just a, process for applying for seating, with one of the few concrete, criteria being that a service body must have existed for 3 years. And, it may be that we ultimately end up with a commonly agreed upon subjective process to evaluate seating applications. But we all decided as a board that, this is a discussion we need to have at the WSC and the cycle ahead. So do we have any questions on this or clarifications?
Online, if you could just raise your hand. There's nobody raising their hand in person.
Okay, yeah, and And also, like, anyone has any questions?
Got one
like,
from Matt.
My question is that it was kind of a break from the norm, that there were no motions brought based on the recommendations of the regions. Can you just give us, or of the work group rather, can you just give us a little bit of your thought process for why you guys decided not to bring motions to seat the recommendations?
yeah, sure. Jack, would you be able to elaborate on that?
Yeah, Matt, I think we felt as a board, this is the conference's decision. In other words, on the one hand, you got a seating criteria that's very clear. And you've got service bodies, in this case, regions, that meet that criteria. And, you know, in Narcotics Anonymous, we're pretty big on guidelines. And if groups or committees, organizations meet criteria, convention committees, we tend to follow our guidelines. So we have that. Concurrent with that, you have an ongoing conversation about sustainability and effective WSC. And as a board, I don't think we have complete consensus on what that looks like. As a fellowship, we don't. This discussion about seating and regions and zones has been going on for decades. So what we tried to do was make it very clear that here are some regions that clearly meet the criteria in GWSNA. Absolutely. The recommendations were made by the work group. We have put links as to how any region can make a motion to seat any of those regions. I'm pretty confident that I've already heard that a couple of regions are going to make motions to seat. And I think to some extent, you know, the board serves all of us. Like, we serve the conference, we serve the fellowship through the delegates. And it just seemed like, rather than the board taking the approach of what has to happen, we would just let the conference do it. So it is a little bit of a different approach. But to be clear, the board as a whole is not opposed to making seating motions. We're making it as easy as we can to do that and providing all the information. But we felt it most appropriate coming from the conference, let this be the conference's decision. And obviously we're going to try to, as a conference, continue the conversation of what makes an effective and sustainable World Service Conference. I hope that helps a little, Matt.
Very much so. Thank you.
So any other questions? Okay, so do you want to go through like the motions now, Jack?
Well, I think we'll ask if there's some other stuff before we leave the seating thing. I want to make sure, because there's a lot of delegates here or people that potentially could make motions. In the CAT, in the memos we've sent, there are links. If this is something that you want to do, feel free to reach out to the board. There are hyperlinks to do it. If you have questions of how to do it, I see we've got our COPAC Daniel here. He could probably help you how to do it. So again, if you have any questions or need any assistance with that, and as always, if you wonder, how do I make a motion to seat one of these regions? Another option is you can always email wb@na.org. You will get a response back that almost certainly will have the links and again, another way how to do it. I think we got one more hand. I see Des.
Hi, everybody. I'm an addict named Des. Thanks for calling on me, Jack. I just had a housekeeping question about if a region decided they wanted to do a motion for the seating. We have what's the deadline, and would it go under what we've done in the past where all the regions that would put in wanting to do that could work together before it gets released? Is that my understanding?
So in the CAT, what it says, I'll just read it here. Seating any new regions will require a motion from a conference participant using the amendments and seating motions forms posted on the WSC webpage, and it gives the URL. You're also asked to please notify World Board at NA.org by April 1st in order to ensure the motion is in final form by the April 15th deadline. So those would be kind of the hard deadlines. As far as whether you want to bring in some other people to do it, I would think you could. And Hamid, if you don't care, I'll ask if Daniel wants to weigh in. I got to get your camera up, Daniel, but if you want to weigh in on your thought as a COFAC, if that seems accurate, I'd be happy for, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I guess before Daniel answers, I don't mean to cut you off, Daniel.
Yeah.
I just want to say in the past, my experience was that when we would put them in by April 1st, we would work with the other regions that also put in similar amendments. Is that not what I'm understanding?
You know, I would assume that if you get, and I'm just, again, this is probably going to be a COFAC thing, but I assume, let's say, I don't know, 8 regions make a motion to seat Iran Region 1. And interesting, you guys, Iran Region 1 is the second region. Oh, Daniel says I'm barely here, so he probably won't be adding to it. But what, as a former COFAC, what I can say is typically, if you see a bunch of things the same, it's very common to put those together and talk to the people that made it. But that really would be more of a co-facilitator thing than a world board thing.
Okay, I only asked that, Jack, because my concern is I don't want it to get muted. Like if 8 regions put in a motion to seat somebody and they all have different wording in their intent, it could get very confusing.
Sure.
If they weren't allowed to work together. So it would be my hope, and I'm just saying this for everybody, it's my hope that if somebody wants to seat one of the seating people that were recommended, that they would put in the motion, and hopefully we would be allowed to work together as regions that had similar ideas, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I would think, again, I'm not the co-facilitator, but based on past practice, that would be very common and normal.
Okay.
Daniel says he's at his work desk and barely able to participate, so I don't want to speak for him.
Is there a way that we could table that question for Daniel when he's available later?
Well, you might reach out. I would say email wb@na.org, Des, and they'll get a hold of Dan, because it's Daniel and Mario. It's not just one. But what I would say is I have yet to see amendments.
Danny said we could desk it. He just put a chat up. I don't know what that means.
I don't know what that means. I don't know what desk it means, but what I would say is it's very common. I've never seen the WSC not take like things and put them together. And I would assume Mario and Daniel would do the same thing.
Okay, thank you, Jack.
You're welcome.
We have a question from Sandra.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sandy. I'm an addict. I'm sorry, I can't change my name. I don't know why. But hello, everybody. I'll turn my camera on for a second. But I'm here babysitting my granddaughters. So I have 2 of them that look exactly the same. Anyway, so I had a question about zonal delegates. So like, is there a way to know, like, suppose I think a zone has to have 2 unseated regions to have a zonal delegate. So can we know how, is there a chart or something to know how many zones are seated and how many delegates, how many regions they have that are unseated? Because like some of these may result in a net 0. If there's only 2 unseated regions in a zone, and then we give a seat to a region, then they lose their zonal delegate. You see what I'm saying? So that we could see what the ultimate net would be. Thank you.
Hamid, are there, what is it, 6 or 7 zones, I think, that meet the criteria of having 2 or more, I believe?
Yeah.
And whether there's a spreadsheet out there, Sandy, I'm not exactly sure. What I can tell you is if let's say you had a zone that had exactly 2 unseated, just hypothetically, and let's say the conference seated 1. So what would happen under current WSC policy is the impact of that decision would take effect at the end of the conference. So what that would mean is during the conference itself, the zonal delegate would still be a full participant because the impact of seating the region happens at the end of the conference. So in that sense, you don't really have a problem. As far as your question of if we seat someone, does it affect a zone's ability to have representation? I think the best way to answer that would be to ask the zonal representative at the conference, or again, there's probably discussion boards would answer that. In most cases, this is just off the top of my head, if you take like APF, that's never going to be an issue. EDM, it's not going to be an issue. There's probably 2 or 3 zones where that might apply. And off the top of my head, I don't know the exact numbers. Hamid, you might know better than I do on that. I know you track the zones pretty well.
Yeah, I think it would be well, if we give seating, I think only like 3 or 4 zones, but most of them have more than 2 unseated regions.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering if there's any that are like really low that have like only 2 and then are applying to seat one of them. You see what I'm saying? Then that would matter, as well as whether I think for my region, whether they would vote to seat that region, because it would be a net of 0. And yet the region would be, you see what I'm saying? So I don't know, maybe we can have that information at some point. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sandy.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
I do understand. Good question. So I can get you that answer. I can ask Travis to give us a list.
Yes, I think I was on the seating work group, and I think the only one that might be affected by that was Brazil. If we seated all of the regions in Brazil, there might or might not be a zonal delegate, depending on how the regions are set. That's all.
Thanks, Scott. And thanks for your service in that work group. Any other questions? So Hamid, what we talked about was maybe, and we don't have, oh, we got Sherry. Sherry, hi.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sherry. I'm an addict. I'm confused. And there was a letter sent to World Board. And since we're on the seating and terminology, our understanding in the AZF, we have no unseated seated zones. Isn't that correct? Because the motion from 2018 says that we have zonal representation from zones that have 2 or more unseated regions. We did not seat the zone.
Well, Sherry, I've seen that amendment that's come through. I saw that. I don't know if this is quite the place to get into that. I think that terminology, there may be a difference in what people mean by that. I reviewed the minutes from WSC 2018, and certainly the people were talking about seating. The issue, it's sort of like in Narcotics Anonymous when we use phrases like bylaws and guidelines interchangeably. I understand the nuance between representation and seating. In fact, I have a conversation scheduled with the maker of that amendment soon. But I'm struggling under WSC policies to understand much difference between zonal representation and zonal seating as it relates to conference participation. I understand the nuance, and I understand what the motion said in 2018. But I think for the purposes of the conference, whether we call it representation or seating, the efficacy is the same. It's an individual selected by that zone that is representing that zone in the same way that a regional delegate represents a region. So they are a full conference participant. I'm sure we'll have more discussions about the differences between the term representation and seating. And clearly, the motion in 2018 lends itself to some ambiguity. The conference record also informs a little bit about what the conference decided, and I'm sure we'll work through that amendment as it related to FIP motion 1 about zonal seating or representation. So, but would you agree that for the purposes of a person from a zone selected to by the zone to be at the conference to act on their behalf, I don't know that the term matters a whole lot in that context.
We feel that it does because we have regional seating and it has its criteria, and we don't have zonal seating, but we have representatives for the zone. And I think that to say that a zone is seated is has a very different implications to it, because we have not done that.
I look forward to more conversations about it, and then we have to also consider the moratorium the conference put on quote zonal seating. So it's an interesting, you know, it's an interesting discussion for sure.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. But to be clear, I don't want to ruffle any feathers. If I use the term seating versus representation for the purposes of this, I'm talking about that delegate that shows up that the zone picked to do their business at the conference. And whatever term we ultimately end up with, we'll end up with, I'm sure.
Okay, I don't see any more hands, Jack.
What's that?
I don't see any more hands.
No. There was one comment in the chat from Brenda. Yeah, the same thing. I think we're going to hear, probably the conference is going to take on this discussion about seated zones versus represented zones. There's already an amendment to that effect. And honestly, I've only been looking at this for a little bit, but I'm sure as a conference, we'll figure it out and come up with a term and some language that we can all come to agreement on.
I agree.
And so if we use the wrong terms now, it's not meant to be political. It's just, you know, yeah. So anyway, and to answer your question, Joel, the amendment was in relation to the FIT motion about zonals, clarifying whether it's seated or represented. So we'll hear more about this. Okay. Anything more on the seating? All right, Muhammad, take her away.
Okay, so we'll start off with motion 26 to approve the project plan for new recovery informational pamphlet. So there are 19 ideas for the IPs in the 2023 car survey, and including several from these previous motions approved by the WSC. So does anyone want any like extra, more information or any questions? I think I see Jacob's hand.
Yeah, Jacob Addict, RD for North Carolina. It seems like there's been some discussion, and I think I understand what the board's response was, but it seems like there's been some discussion about the fact that in the past, these motions have been about specific projects, whereas in this particular cat, it's more of a shell motion, which then gets filled in with whatever the results of the survey are. I guess my question is, this doesn't seem like a great plan to me in terms of a long-term solution. I understand the rationale behind doing this, but I don't particularly like the idea of placeholder motions. And so I'm curious if there's been any discussion about what this will look like moving forward. Like, is this going to be the norm for how we create motions for these project plans, or is there something else in the works?
Can I answer that, Hamid? Okay, you nodded, I guess. Thank you for the comment. The first thing I want to say to that is an identical motion that this appeared in the 2020 CAT, which was published actually prior to COVID. And in that essay in 2020, and in the discussion, what we said was the advantage that we saw to this approach is it allows the possibilities of looking at all the different literature things side by side, and it allows the conference to give direction. And we're seeing very much an increased ability to get feedback from conference participants through a variety of methods, including webinars and everything else. And so I understand for sure some desire for specificity, but given the reality that we already have as a fellowship selected more projects than we possibly have resources to do, and we've been saying this for about 5 years now, that we can't do what the conference has already asked us to do. We can do it, but not on a timeline that people would like. We've been very clear about that this approach seems to make the most sense. I would say it's not a new approach in 2023. It's something we started talking about in 2018. This exact motion appeared in the 2020 CAT. Specifically, that motion, well, it read identical. So, and then that motion is coming back now in 2023. So, I would say, yeah, the motion 19 was to approve the project plan for new recovery informational pamphlets. So I would say it is an approach that World Services and the board is recommending, that we've been talking about for about 5 years, and that's sort of the reasons for it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Joel?
Down under.
Oh, sorry.
Excuse me, sorry about that.
I have a question. Do you guys want us to facilitate and call on people, or is someone there doing that?
If you could allow me to do that, Jack, then I can also get people that are in the room.
I prefer it. That'd
Yeah.
be great. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joel.
Hi, I'm Joel, grateful recovering addict, Florida RD. I heard what you said, Jack. However, me and Ramon have been to a number of car workshops in the last couple of weeks, and the same conversation comes up, and the answer is similar to what you're saying. However, and it's gone as far as in the Southeast Zonal Forum, it was basically said this is a broken system. How do we, is the World Board working on a decision-making process? We've got motions for new recovery IPs, we've got the survey. You balance both out, but there has not been a decisive or definite answer to the question that's been asked multiple times about who makes the judgment on which IP gets done, which project plan moves forward.
So you're asking under the, you want to take it, Hamid, or do you want me to?
Yeah, it's okay. Go ahead. Sir.
So ultimately, what I would say is the fellowship does. I don't think we've had this system long enough. When we did the poll in, I think let's see, when was this done? I think it was 2018. 82% of conference participants preferred the umbrella approach for IP and tool projects. Ultimately, I believe how the board would make this decision is we would go to conference participants and ask what you want us to do. Could the board, I suppose, say this is what we're doing without seeking any guidance? I guess we could, but I can't imagine we would. That's why we consistently have been asking for feedback at webinars and in other formats. I wasn't there when somebody said the system is broken. I would agree that the system needs some work. The biggest failing in the system right now is lack of resource. Like the broken part of the system, so to speak, is lack of resource. And it isn't, I mean, sometimes it's people, sometimes it's translations, sometimes it's ability to coordinate. In many respects, we've been limping along since about April of 2020. We still have 40% less special workers than we had. We have the whirlwind of daily activities of trying to get literature out, doing the things that we have to do. So what I would call the proactive projects, the things that we want, but that aren't responsive to day-to-day requests for services, often get on the back burner. Because if your choice is to provide the services that people are expecting, that we respond with, that takes resources that could be used for something like this. So I think as far as what the board's trying to do to fix it, we're trying to have more resource, and that's a combination of human and financial. So I think that's the long-term ultimate fix. We're very early in this umbrella approach, and Hamid, I want you to weigh in on this too, but speaking for myself as a board member, I wouldn't I don't think my opinion's any more valid than yours, Joel, or anyone else's here. I mean, I got an opinion, you know, I'd like some of you'll hate me for this. I'd like a gay and lesbian IP, you know, like, but I get that some people don't want that. Great. But, you know, I'd advocate for that because as a gay person, I thought we should have one, but I get other people don't agree with that, you know, and I may not get my way, but I know the things I'm interested in. But as a board member, I wouldn't shove that down the fellowship's throat or even try to. And if what we need is, you know, an IP directed towards, I don't know, how to do H&I better or sponsorship or whatever, great. Like, let's let the fellowship decide and then accept that conscience. But I think and Hamid will weigh in, but I believe the boards as a whole, our commitment would be try to get a conscience of what we do under this umbrella approach and not have our personal opinions sway it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that, Jack. And I mean, I guess the way we've operated as a board is always under the principle of we want to hear what the fellowship wants and be guided by that. So I agree with what Jack said. Does that answer the question, Joe?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, I understand the resources, human resources, especially even more, I think, than even financial. It's just, how does the priority list get decided? And I think that's still an issue, you know, that hasn't been, it still needs working on, I guess. I mean, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Always room for improvement. And
but you answered the question to the best of, I guess, anyone's ability. Again, maybe broken system is the wrong way it was described, but you know, no one's sure between motions and the survey on how does the decision finally get made on which project gets moved forward. And I think that's still very vague to the fellowship. And I like Jack's answer that, you know, it goes back to the fellowship, the body makes that decision. I'm not sure that the fellowship as a whole sees that happening at this point, because there's a lot of questions still. And like I said, I've been doing numerous car workshops and that question has constantly come up.
Joel, what also might help in both the 2020 CAT and the 2023 CAT, it says the WSC will prioritize, which to me indicates that prioritization would be what governs it. What I don't know is what vehicle we're going to use to prioritize. You know, as we're planning this conference, for example, I'll tip my hand a little bit. We're thinking old business may go a long, long time potentially because of being hybrid and not being able to go in. So what mechanism, what metric, the process whereby we ask the conference to prioritize, I would say isn't fully determined. But I think the commitment is the conference has to do the prioritization with our belief that the conference is the forum where the groups speak and we listen. That's the representation we're using. So it would be a prioritization by the conference. And I can't imagine a situation where the board wouldn't be bound by that. What the conference tells us to do is what we'll do.
exactly.
Thanks.
All right, go ahead, Kelly.
Testing, 1, 2. All right, somebody has muted me. Must be personal. I'm sure of it.
Yeah, we got
Anyway.
you.
Hear you.
Kelly Attic, RD for the Alabama Northwest Florida region. So first off, normally not critical, but I think I will be here. When literature projects are put into a format of a CAR motion, it presents the fellowship with a decision to say yes or no for that project. When we say yes to a project, let's say DRT-MAT, which is an important issue here in Alabama because DRT-MAT is a massive profitable industry and is having a direct impact on newcomers coming into our fellowship. And the fellowship as a whole previously agreed that that was a project that was important to the fellowship and were given as an independent decision, yes or no. We agreed to yes. So here we see DRT put back into the literature survey. And my concern is that as a conference, the fellowship said, we agree. And when you put it into a literature survey, my question is it possible that when it's competing against 17 other projects, that it could be overlooked, marginalized, and no longer become a priority? And how do we balance a decision that the fellowship has made, a yes or no on that project, being marginalized because something else may be the flavor of the month that gets a higher vote on the literature survey? So does the literature survey process supersede what a conference motion vote agreed to for a literature project? And so what I think should have happened, and I don't like to be critical, but motions that have been made and approved by the fellowship, those projects should not be put into the literature survey for future projects to eliminate the possibility of marginalizing or eliminating what the fellowship has already agreed to as a project to go forward. Over.
That settles that.
I guess what I'm saying is, I started to keep rambling, but as an RD, when I start to workshop this is what I'm thinking, right? And I may be gun decking or I may be stacking the deck, but I'm going to be highlighting literature projects that had, and maybe put a reference to a CAR or to a conference where this was already approved by the fellowship. So please make sure that as you're selecting 2 or 3 out of the 17, you got to hit that again. And I don't know what other delegates are doing, but it's like, let's not forget the women in IP. Let's not forget the DRT. These are motions that have been passed, but they're there again. So if these are still important to you, you've got to select these again so they will stay high on the survey count. Over.
We hear you, Kelly, loud and clear. And this can definitely, like we said, there's always room for improvement. We can definitely discuss this, and yeah, we hear you. Thank you.
I've been at workshops where RDs say guys.
Oh. No, she's Sandy.
Okay, the kids are napping. Let's see how this goes. So I want, to piggyback on what Kelly said too. I don't know. I don't know what else the fellowship could do to be heard. Like your response, Jack, was, we listened to the will of the fellowship, but there was a motion and it was passed. I don't know what else could possibly be showing the will of fellowship. But so I'm just piggybacking on that with Kelly, but also I don't remember, but I don't know. I thought there was budget line items because all this money of whatever these project plans are going to cost is going to go into my favorite table found on page multiple times in this, but once on page 24, where it says the World Service Conference is 22% of the NAWS Inc. budget. And that's because these project plans get put in there, right? That's one of the many things that gets put in under WSC expenses is project plans. And so without knowing how much the project plans cost, I just don't see something like we voted for the one already and the Women in Recovery too is my understanding, but something like I don't know how much it costs to do a project plan for issue discussion topics. And I don't know how much addicts really use in issue discussion topics. And maybe we wouldn't want to do those if it costs, you know, $100,000 to do that. Is that really worth it? You know what I mean? But I don't have any way to know how much these cost. Didn't they used to have like a amount of money in them? That's my question.
Well, what they used to have, Sandy, was the project plans that had work groups had an amount of money in them. So for example, the mental health IP, youth and recovery did have dollars associated with them because there was a budget to have an in-person work group. As we've said, this cycle, for a variety of reasons, everything will be virtual. So the costs associated would be largely staff, special worker costs that already exist, but they wouldn't involve the expenses of a work group. And I think, at least on literature projects, often the dollar amount was specific to travel and specific to a work group.
So these wouldn't all be free though, because don't you allocate like a portion of the NAWS Inc. special workers' time and call it a World Service Conference expense if we approve these project plans? So without knowing how many new recovery information pamphlets, what they would be, what the cost would be, what the percentage of NAWS Inc. special workers would be, and having some kind of budget that's going to be added to the WSC line item so that we'll again come back to the WSC is unsustainable because it's 22% of the budget. You know, that's my favorite slide. You know, it just seems it's like we're voting to add stuff to our own line item without knowing in any way how much it's going to cost. So I don't know. I don't know if there's a way to break these down at this point. Probably not. We just have to vote blindly and not know. I mean, our WSC line item could go up to 50% of the budget. And you'd say, well, you guys voted for it. So, you know what I mean? So I would prefer in the future that we have a dollar amount attached to these things so we know exactly what we're adding to our own line items.
Okay.
Thank you, Sandy. Wolvina?
All right. Good morning, everyone. I have a very bad connection, so I can't turn my camera on. But I wanted to follow up about the literature question and just pose this hypothetical. I'm wondering, it sounds like the way that the literature projects are burdening the board in terms of the priorities. And I understand the last question about why certain IPs that were passed were thrown back into the survey, which once again, the number of IPs there is going to make another priority difficult. But my hypothetical is, would the World Board be better unburdened if a separate literature division was uncoupled from the CAR-CAT conference process that could work continuously during the year and have a wider participation format that was not restricted to these separate literature determinants? It's a hypothetical question, but possibly a motion might emanate from that in the future.
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me I will attempt to answer to the best of my ability, and then Jack, please step in if I misstep in any way. But I think it's not about, you know, having a separate entity for literature. I think it's more about, you know, resources and process. So I'll give you an example of, let's say, SPAD, since I was a part of the SPAD. And SPAD, we had a work group that met, and we have certain processes that we follow when we create any piece of literature. And the work group meets, we gather material, we have R&I, we have proofreading, and and all these, and these all take resources and time. And SPAD was a 4-year project. In the middle of it, COVID hit, and we had to also we continued the work. It was a lot harder to actually do it purely online for such a dense project. But I think that would be my answer to it. It wouldn't be that a separate entity would finish things quicker. I think it's more about resources and the process. Would you have anything to add to that, Jack?
No, and I think your experience as the point person on SPAD is superior to mine on literature for sure. No, I think it's great. Good answer.
Thank you. And also for the DRT MAT, we had we started with the IDT, and we basically gathered heaps and heaps of information. And when we try to put that together into something that would give us a concise direction, we didn't have a direction. Like, we didn't have a this is our stance on DRT MAT. So this is when we started to ask the fellowship again for more information. And I think it's all about this. It's the process. It's gathering, worldwide opinion and experiences and all of that. And we have thousands and thousands and thousands of input, and that all takes resources and time, as well. So I think it's more about that. That's according to, my experience and what I've seen.
All right, yeah, well, thanks for answering that. And I guess it also, if there was a separate literature entity, it would seem there would be a separate funding stream and resource stream for that. But thank you for considering my question.
Yeah, thank you, Lavina. And that's a really good question. Like I said, I understand the implications. Like, if we had a separate, I do understand that it would be different, but this is more of a, I can't answer that off the bat. And I can't even assume or guess, because that would require, projections, studies, access to information that I don't have currently. So I wouldn't be able to give a educated guess on that.
All right, Matt?
Hi, everyone. Addict named Matt. I think you touched on this sort of briefly, but my question is really more of a process. And I know we use the term very often that we're paving this road while we're driving on it, kind of thing. But when we did this prioritization in 2018, we used that whole dotology thing, which was pretty interesting. But do we have, are we going to find out at any point what the process for this prioritization is going to be? Or is this something where we're going to show up and I'll just have to kind of learn it 10 minutes before we do it again, kind of thing?
I don't think we know yet, Matt. This will be a World Service Conference unlike any other. A majority of the representatives, delegates there will have never attended a conference. A significant portion, including a significant number of representatives in the US, will be participating virtually. We likely won't be going, late at night, given time zone constraints, as well as the virtual piece of it. And we've got quite a bit of business. So I don't think we're in a position yet to even try to recommend what the best way of doing this might be. It's even possible that we'll have some either or scenarios. In other words, if there's time, we might do it one way. If there's not time, we might have to do it another way. So we just don't know yet. I would say whatever the process is, it'll be telegraphed as soon as possible. It's particularly difficult with the conference, with business, knowing how much time you have and how much time business takes. And we are very challenged this conference with yeah, with having the time to do what needs to be done while considering the time zone issues of the hybrid participants. So it'll be interesting. I think we'll get through it. I think it'll be fine, but I don't know how that's going to unfold. I don't think anybody does yet. And, you know, as a board, we're trying our best to come up with solutions that balance all that for everyone. And so I don't have an answer for you yet.
Thanks, Jack. We have a question here. Patty?
And thanks Kelly for bringing up the highlighted blue options on the literature survey. And at the last conference participant webinar, the Philadelphia RD asked that question about should people select these or not, since they're already approved. And I was wondering, maybe other people are clear on it. I'm still confused if Hamid or Jack could say, like, I've been to their workshops where addicts are being told, don't even bother selecting DRT or the women's IP because it's already approved. Don't use your options to select those items. Is that what we should be telling members, or is, you know, reselecting them, showing more support for them the thing we want to be telling? I don't know what to tell people.
You know, Hamid, what I'm thinking as I'm hearing this, first of all, I would not say don't select them, but I'm almost thinking on the survey, Hamid, it would be good if there was something afterwards. So let's say DRT, let's say the women in recovery one, some indication that this has already been approved, I think would be helpful. Like Kelly's point was, this has already been approved, so you should approve it again. But whether that's an asterisk, a note that this was approved at, I think communicating that on the survey makes some sense, and I'm going to suggest that. I think it's probably a good idea.
Definitely, yeah.
What do you think, Hamid?
Definitely. I mean, this is something that I've heard, you know, like
Yeah.
we've had the car workshop before. We've heard a couple delegates, so I do think that's a good idea.
Okay.
But definitely don't tell them not to choose it
Yeah.
if it's a priority.
Do you think it would make sense to send an email out to delegates clarifying that too, so we're not misinforming our members?
Well, the board meets next Friday. I don't see, we have, there's no reason we can't have a short discussion on that. And I don't know that an email will be sent out, but we're very much, and I know Danny, and there may be another board member on here too, we're very much hearing the concern, and we get what you're saying, and we'll do our best to improve that and make sure that how we best communicate that yet, I don't know, but I would think the best place to do it is within the survey, not in a separate email. In other words, so somebody doing the survey has those instructions of how to best do it while they're doing it. So I'm not sure what the best way to do that is yet, but we're hearing you, and we'll try to improve it.
Definitely.
Oh, Mary is saying she took the survey online. There is an asterisk in explanation. So Mary, is it saying now, for example, for women in recovery, if you don't mind sharing that, is it saying now that
it simply has an asterisk and explains that they are pre-approved in prior conferences? And I mean, the survey clearly says that for individuals and for regional participants, you can take it either way. And it asks you whether you're a member or a representative. And then it explains that. So you have the option of affirming if you select the ones with asterisks, or selecting others that you want to individually or as a group prioritize.
Thank you. Good to see you, Mary.
Thank you. Brenda?
Hi, guys. My name is Brenda. I'm from Philly. I too was concerned about the motions. I mean, that we was told, and this is what we have to take to our groups, that the motions that are highlighted are already approved. And exactly, it says the date in parentheses is the year that the motions is passed. You know, so so for us, when we go, we would tell our members that, meaning that we will overlook that because it's saying that it's already passed. So, but yet it seems to be some confusion here because I'm confused now. You know, can you explain to me what we should tell them when it's in writing? That is that they had already been passed. So would you, I mean, you know, I wouldn't try to vote on something that is already passed. You know, so there's some confusion there, and I think that should be clear, you know, because there's a lot of home groups that's gonna hear the same stuff. And there's, you know, that's point of information.
No, thanks so much, Brenda. I mean, I'm hearing what you're saying, and I get it. I think our effort was, and the framing was, hey, we've got way more projects already approved, plus the new ones. We want to know what your priorities are. And that's a good faith effort to say, hey, which do you want us to work on first? You know, we know, for example, a lot of resources the last 2 years were expended on virtual meetings, and that kind of leapfrogged everything because all of a sudden virtual meetings needed a lot of resources and we provided them. But I hear what you're saying, makes perfect sense to me, that if I'm sitting in a group and somebody says, well, you don't need to worry about that one, it's already approved, so it doesn't need any more support. I understand there's a problem.
So what are you saying? Because what would I say to them? Because there's several motions in here that supposedly been approved 2018, 2020. So this is the dates beside them saying when they was approved. You know, so you know, what do we say to the members? Because it's gonna create some conflict.
I think what we say is we have more approved projects and proposed projects and we have resources to accomplish, and we're trying to understand what's most important to you. I think that's what you say, because that is what we're trying to discern.
Okay. All right, we have Pam here.
My name's Pam, and I'm an addict. I noticed that under revising existing recovery informational pamphlets, you say that you're asking the WSC to approve at least one IP. Under new recovery informational pamphlets, it doesn't list how many you're hoping to take on. Do y'all know how many you're hoping to take on? Or none? I don't know. Is there a number for that?
Do we have a number for that, Jack? I don't think we do.
No, I would say it's very low, given that we can't, we've already, but no, I don't have a number for that.
Yeah. And I also see a question from Kelly. Will it become less of a priority or a high priority because it's been passed as a car motion? I think the answer to that would be it's a priority either way. It's basically what the fellowship and WSC want, and they're all priorities. It's not less or more. It's still a priority.
And I see, like, Jonathan put a thing in there about 3 or 4. Part of it too is the project. Let me give you an example. In this room, we all know the guide to local service is woefully in need of updating. It's been in need of updating for a decade probably. But if that became the priority, that's a much bigger project than a short IP. And so I think too, what will determine a little bit what happens is what the priorities are. From my own perspective as a board member, I'm very clear the conference already gave direction on the DRT MAT, which we've struggled to get information that'll be useful, as well as women in recovery, have already been approved. And so that to me is significant. It is, it simply is, because the conference has already indicated that. But that doesn't take away from, I think, the importance of asking the conference, what are your priorities? Because if you have multiple approved things, understanding what our members say they need the most right now is important, and different parts of the world need different things. That's another thing we see. Probably the most harmonious thing we've had in the last few years, despite the challenges associated with it, is everybody agreed we needed virtual meeting resources. And the fellowship, I mean, it was great. All sorts of people created them individually. World Services created some, gathered them, and that worked pretty well. There's some great resources out there. So this is a relatively new process. We're committed to figuring out what the fellowship wants most. And for the people that have been asking, you know, what would happen if like women in recovery scored really low compared to everything else, I would say on some level, we don't exactly know. The board would have to talk about it. But if it did score low, that doesn't take away from the fact we've already been given direction to do it. So I don't have an exact answer for you. But I would say it's fundamentally different to have a project that's already been approved by the conference than something that hasn't been. So we would talk about it and probably ask for some guidance to figure it out.
So I had a little bit more to my question, so I'm gonna try to go back. On the DRT MAT, obviously, conference approved, important piece of literature. Sounds like it may end up being pretty short if we can only come to a consensus on a few little pieces. Maybe that's all that it is. It's a pretty short pamphlet. But I don't know. A lot of resources have been spent on it already, and I think we need to take that into account. So that being said, I think that that's an important thing to remember. I can't imagine. I also see the loftiness of trying to come up with one for resources for women in recovery when that is so different around the world. So my hat's off to you. The fact that they have such different levels of resource needed is what makes it hard to decide what to put down on your tick. So I think that just adds to the weight of the survey. But as well, revising an IP would take a lot less effort than creating new ones. So I was kind of surprised that revising was only one, where apparently there could be an infinite number on new informational packets. I'm sure that's not true, but you know, I would like to see a number proposed for that so that people have a real expectation of what they can check on that list.
That was it, Ben. Pam, thank you. Des?
Did you just call on me? I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry, guys. My dad just died like 5 days ago, so I'm dealing with a lot of things. So I'm trying to stay on, but and you might have already answered this question. I apologize if I'm rerouting the question, but let's say that the survey comes back and women in recovery and MRT is not high on the replies. Does that mean even though we voted them in at past things that they will not be considered anymore? Or does that just mean it doesn't make them a high priority right now? Thanks.
I don't think the board has actually analyzed that. It would be more the latter than the former. I mean, obviously it would be, what we would know is the fellowship has indicated they're not a high priority right now. It's what we would do. We would have to discuss it. But it doesn't change the fact there are already approved motions to do those.
Okay, because, well, and the reason I asked this is when we were in the 2020 virtual, and I know we've been paving the road as we walk on it. Everything's been very different. I understand that. But when we were in there and we got the survey results back that most of us had filled out before the pandemic was affecting our travel arrangements and such, it kind of seemed like the survey came back with one result and then we prioritized in a different direction, which was okay. Like, I get it, things change, but I just want to make sure that the vote for the women's IP and the MRT is not forgotten in the midst of the confusion that I'm hearing that delegates are putting out there, which it's hard to give the right information all the time. So.
that it? Thanks, Des. Brenda?
Yeah, if you could clear something up for me, please, if you will, Billy, Jack, on the survey, right? And where it says choose 3, then it says choose up to 2 or whatever. My confusion is when it says the one that says choose 3, it has 1, 2, 3 sections, right? So is it saying choosing 3 out of each one of those sections, or is it saying choosing 3 out of, you choose 3 out of each, you know, just all of these sections? Out of the whole 1, 2, 3, only choose 3. You see what I'm saying? If you look at your survey, right? If you look at the survey, the confusion for me is you have the heading says choose 3. Choose 3 of which? 1, 2, 3 blocks, or choose, this says choose 2. You know, I could go with the choose 2. I know you want me to choose 2 on this side, but how many sections on this side do you want me to choose 3 from? Anybody understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
Yeah.
So could you clear that for me? So when I explain it, I could be able to do that. I know what I'm doing.
Ahmed, I don't have the survey in front of me.
Oh.
You know the answer to this?
For instance, it says new literature to support step work. Then it says create a new IP or pamphlet. Then it says target literature. Then it says choose 3 out of each heading, or out of all 3 headings, just choose 3.
No, I understand the question. I'm just not looking at it. And so that makes it hard to respond and tell, but I'm wondering if Ahmed has it. I know Danny's on, maybe he has it. And if none of us know, if you email wb@na.org, they'll tell you. I just don't want to give you an answer. Yeah, I can't give you an answer without looking at it. I can try to pull it out.
You said email what? I mean, W what?
wb@na.org.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's probably better than other things. Read out the whole page.
And I saw Mary, I think Mary may know the answer.
Online, Jack, when you're doing the survey, and remember, all of you can do the survey online as individuals and then do the representation for your region. 2 different surveys, they're weighted. But each section tells you at the top of the section how many to select from that. And I'm pretty sure I read on the survey that they are sectioned by topic. Also, I think where it said book length pieces, it has an explanation about how much that these are kind of together because they take this long and how much is expected to spend. And then IPs are, you select 2 or 3 IPs because shorter projects and easy to complete in one cycle. I mean, each section tells you how many to select. And
I'm online now. Online, it's much clearer, Brenda, apparently than so online, it breaks it up by section. So for example, the new recovery literature, choose up to 3. Revisions to existing, choose up to 2. So I think the problem may be the paper one isn't as clear.
Yeah, I think so too, Jack. I think that's what I think it's per section.
Yeah, I believe it is per sec. At least online, that's definitely what it is. So I have that pulled up right now. And I want everybody to notice we did add the box about no new literature in each section based on your feedback. For those people that wanted nothing new, that's now an option too. Although if you have to pick 2 and you only have one of those, I guess you could do I don't know and no revisions. Otherwise, you're kind of stuck with something. And I wanted to go back. Sandy had asked about the budget. I did want to point out in the project plan, we did mention the that issue that for the first time, none of the project plans have a line item in the budget since they are planned to be accomplished virtually. and that even though they need WSC direction and support, as well as commitment of human resources, which means world board and staff time, these are virtual work groups. And I think the implication of that is not that it costs nothing, but the costs are relatively small compared to historical projects. So I understand people wanting to know expenses if you're approving something. What we've said in the CAT is the reason we haven't included it is that because all of these are virtual, there's a inference that they're not extraordinarily cost weighting on the fellowship. In other words, the cost burden is not extreme. So I get that's not a precise number, but it is an indication of why that's not called out in the budget separately.
Yeah, and also most of the costs would come after the project plan comes up with what they're finding. It's in the project itself.
I'm thinking we might be done with this motion.
Yep, I do believe so.
All right.
Okay, so
Next.
the next motion is almost, it's slightly related. It's to approve the project plan for, to approve the project plan for revising existing recovery informational pamphlet.
Any questions?
Okay, and then motion 28 is to approve the project plan for IDTs, the issue discussion topic.
I don't see no questions.
Okay, and
I want to add something there because in the CAT, we talked about, we plan to schedule time at WSC 2023 to begin framing. While it's true we plan to, because there's so many delegates here, I can't stress enough the challenge we're seeing with accomplishing what needs to be accomplished at this conference in hybrid format. So it will be a challenge, and anything any of us can do to increase our efficiency, because here's the reality. We could spend 2/3 of this conference in business. And interestingly, when I was, let's see, there's some of you who are on the WSC, the Future Work Group here. One of the things that came out of that is what makes a good World Service Conference. Well, believe it or not, some people thought a good World Service Conference was one that primarily had lots of motions, lots of parliamentary process, and a whole lot of debate. And that was a great conference. Okay, guys, I see some thumbs up. There were others that thought that's a horrific conference, that's a circle of hell, and they wanted lots of discussion, lots of free thinking, lots of ideas. Other people thought a great conference was one that might plan the next conference. In other words, different people have different ideas of what makes a great conference. So as a board, we're trying to strike that balance. And I will say that this conference, because we've never done it before, having so much, we did have a little bit of hybrid participation in 2018. This is going to be totally different. I mean, we're anticipating, I don't know, 20 to 40 people participating virtually, probably. We don't know for sure. We're still getting numbers in, but it will look different. And so anything we can collectively do to help that process work well, to do as much as possible, is important. So when I see a line in the CAT that says, like on this topic, we plan to schedule time at WSC 23 to do this, we do plan to. But please don't take that as an absolute commitment that we will, because we will try to, but we have to do business. We don't have a choice. And when I say we don't have a choice, as a fellowship, we've decided we have to do this. So thinking about what we can do, I mean, we're going to come in the conference with our poll results. We'll have some advantages, but I'm not worried about it. I just know I haven't experienced a conference. I think it'll be fine, but I do know for those of you that have been before, it's going to look different. It'll be different than what you've seen before. It just will be. And if we want as much opportunity to do as much as possible and to try different things, we're going to have to collectively probably go a little bit out of our comfort zones and get used to something that looks and feels a little different, as it will. Thanks.
Thank you, Derek. Okay, motion 29 to approve the project plan for new and revised service rules.
I don't see any questions. Any questions?
Okay, and we can always come back if questions pop up later on. Motion 30 to approve the project plan for future of the WSC. So motion 30 is about the future of the WSC, right? Is that right?
Correct. Correct.
Okay, yeah.
Sure, Hamid, I got that one.
Yeah, definitely. I was gonna pass that on. But where's the question? Is it? Is it
Well, I think what I heard is they'd asked me to go back to that one and give a little bit of information about what it looks like rather than just the motion.
Oh, okay, okay.
Kind of like the intent, so to speak, or what we're trying to accomplish. So this motion, the scope of the project to some extent depends on the decision made at this conference at WSC 2023 regarding the idea of a 3-year cycle. So if that's adopted, a main focus of this project will be developing ideas about how a 3-year cycle can help us be more effective. But there's a lot more than just the length of the cycle to talk about. And we've said elsewhere that I think what we said, if you stretch a canvas, I'm reading this now, you can paint much more on it. And this project is about framing ideas of how we can be more effective with more time between our in-person WSCs. If we don't approve, if that isn't approved, there's still plenty to talk about with the World Service Conference. It's been a discussion topic for years. There will certainly be some kind of focus on a criteria for seating of regions and zones. There are always improvements. Every conference, we think of things and ideas of how to improve and discuss. I mean, I see, I don't mean to pick out Lewis and Sandy and others, but there have been some of you that have put out a whole lot of amazing ideas, some of which have been implemented. But because the conference only meets every 2 or 3 years, you can have a good idea in 2008 and you don't see it implemented until 2016. But the idea is having a work group focused on improving the World Service Conference. And I would say it will be a more robust discussion with a 3-year cycle than without, but regardless, we see a benefit in having this. And that's, and the other thing is, just like with the WSC of the Future work group that we had, gosh, was that, I think it was, yeah, it was 2018 to roughly 2020. We've asked each zone to select a person for this work group. So in other words, rather than the board choosing people, we've asked each zone to select a person from their zone to participate in those discussions. That worked pretty well for the WSC of the Future work group. So we thought we would try that approach again in an effort to have as many diverse voices at the table as possible. So that's who would comprise the work group, along with probably a couple of board members. Typically, there's a point person and maybe a point person and another board member would be typical.
Thank you, Jack. Wolvina?
Hi, everybody. So with the future of the WSC, even if, and I guess the wording here is if it's contingent on the 3-year cycle. However, I think I wanted to hear you expand a little bit on what you meant by the in-car motion so that, people could have a better idea. Because, there's a couple of topics mentioned in that work group. I'm sorry, in that motion description. So I'm curious about how vetting car motions might appear in what your intent of this motion is. And also, I'm really interested in what improving collaborations between zonal forums and world services, what you envision that might look like, because I'm thinking in an earlier essay in the CAT, you mentioned how or why more of a role of zones working together with world services is limited, or you feel that it's limited. So I was hoping you could speak about how the improved collaboration with zonal forums and world services would happen. And did you mean on a project basis or just a discussion basis?
Well, Vina, I assume you're asking me, and I really can't answer most of that. And what I mean, I can tell you historically, out of the WSC the Future Work Group, one of the focuses was collaboration of zones. And what we've seen since that time is regular meetings of zones and increased collaboration. But I think, if I'm understanding correctly, you're asking a couple of questions: how zones might collaborate, how car motions might be vetted, and I think there was one other thing. Well, I believe those topics are very likely to be topics, as we've both indicated here, and just, from common sense, we can guess those would be topics this work group would handle or would address. How they address them, what ideas they're going to come up with, I don't know. I mean, that's the whole point of bringing people together. To go to your question about the car motions, I think there are many people involved in world services for a while that feel some vetting of car motions is appropriate. And there's probably some people that feel it isn't. So I would assume that would be one of the charges under either scenario to talk about that, because I think there is an interest in that discussion. Absolutely the same is true of collaboration with zones. Unlike car motions, I don't think anybody disagrees that better collaboration amongst service bodies is an ideal we aspire to. So that'll happen. But beyond saying that we're going to create a space, create a work group to do that, I don't want to offer you, I mean, maybe one-on-one, if you want to talk to me, I can give you my opinions on some of this, but I don't have a public opinion as to where this should go or what the work groups or how they should ultimately do that. I think that would be up to the work group to decide after there is a common understanding of where we are now and what we might be trying to achieve.
Well, Jack, here's, I guess what this is where my question is coming from. If the World Board itself determined this motion, there should have been an intent that the World Board discussed about the scope of this. So I would love to talk to you one-on-one, but I guess as a board and as a board member, you guys must have had more in-depth intent about the way that this was created and that you could speak from that perspective.
Well, sure, but that even came out of discussions in webinars. I mean, for example, if we take the issue of vetting car motions, we know because we've heard it, that there's great interest in that. But other than saying that some of the topics we anticipate we focused on include vetting car motions, determining what can be done in person or out of person, I mean, those are certainly topics the board believes would be useful for this work to discuss. So if you're asking that, absolutely. Yeah, we're very clear that we think those are topics that are worth discussing. What we don't have are the outcomes of those discussions at this time. And so there isn't a whole lot to add other than what's in there. Absolutely, the vetting of car motions, in my mind, I'm a policy person and a former co-facilitator, and I have an opinion about car motions. But I think it's for the work group to decide what processes might improve it. But yeah, the board believes that discussion would be very useful and that hopefully some improvements come out of it. And I don't know what more I could say. Yes, the board's intent is to have that discussion, but we say that in the essay. So I'm not sure, Wovina, if you're asking, and maybe I misunderstood, but I thought maybe you were asking of where we thought this should go, that discussion.
Well, I wanted a little more expansion. When you talk about improving collaboration, do you mean direct collaboration through zones that are, for example, zones engaged in writing motions together? I know in the history right now of the conference, we have one zone that put a motion forward as a zonal body, which is the Latin American zone, when they did the motion on the online guidebook, which, you know, I don't know, I guess that's somewhere else in the wind. I don't know if that's in a literature survey either. But in terms of zonal bodies, vetting and creating motions in the future, and the World Board participating with zones to do that. Now, you did say you're not sure about how any of that could transpire when this work group is created, but when you say collaboration, is it just discussion, or is it on definitive projects, or that's to be determined?
I would say both. I think for times it is definitive projects. I mean, I'm thinking of some zonal efforts right now of the readers in prisons, the ebooks. I'm thinking of some of the PR things that have come up. I mean, I would rather have Jane or somebody talk about that, but I think there are some actual projects and opportunities. And then I think what I've seen is when zones are communicating, some of this stuff happens organically. So one zone says, hey, we're doing this with DOC, or we're having this issue with whatever that issue is. And that seems to lead to really us being better able to carry our message. And I don't know that, what I would say when the board is talking about these things, different board members probably have different ideas. Like Hamid, coming from the ATF, may have different ideas of what's valuable for zonal collaboration than I know from my experience at Western State Zonal Forum, which is my home zone. But what I would say is, at the board meeting, what I recall is a combination of what you talked about. Some of it is actual stuff that might benefit, and some of it's just collaborating and being on the same page and sharing things that work, like sharing ideas that work, sharing practices that work. So what we seem to have learned with greater zonal collaboration that's happened over the last few years with the zonal meetings is we're more effective if we're communicating and sharing ideas and practices. So I don't know that it's anything more than that at this point, although a variety of ideas have been thrown out there.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely, yeah.
Sandy.
Babies are still napping. So this, as I said, this is like one of my favorite topics because it's every year. And I've said before that if we stop talking about the future of the World Service Conference, we could cut an entire day off the World Service Conference and save a lot of money. One of the problems that I have with this conversation is the circular nature of it. I'm kind of a solution-oriented person. So I guess if we had more of a goal, I don't know if it's like a financial thing that Anthony, if he had like a dollar amount in mind of what he feels the World Service Conference should cost, or a number of people. Like at first I heard it was not a matter of money, but now I hear it is a matter of money. So I thought it was a matter of procedure and kind of the unmanageability at the conference. So there was some improvements. Thank you for, acknowledging that, Louis and I, but anyway, but like there was some improvements to procedure. I thought that was the problem. But I guess the problem I have with this circular discussion is there's no end goal. If we had an end goal, I remember asking Danny, if we move to a 3-year cycle, can we stop talking about the future of the World Service Conference? And he said, no. I'm like, oh my God, like, when is this going to be? When are we going to, I just ask, I guess for the World Board to really think about what does unsustainable mean and have some kind of goal in mind so we can meet that goal or understand what it is that maybe there's not a consensus about it, about what this means. Is it the number of people? Is it the amount of money? Is it the procedure? So that we can, I mean, I do appreciate that there's two really clear goals for this work group about collaborating on motions and seating requests. So that's good. But anyway, so there's some narrowing it down, but I just ask that we try to think about what does unsustainable mean and use some terminology that's a little bit more specific so we can get to an end of this conversation.
There is no.
Billy, thank you.
Hey guys, I'm an addict named Billy, Greater Philadelphia. Hello, everyone. Thank you guys all for your service, WB, host people, and everybody else. Listen, I hate to bring this back up again, the survey. I am one of the people that have workshopped this at least a dozen times, that those pre-approved, already passed literature projects were for informational purposes in the survey. I get the sense that we're kind of, evolving with this as we go along, which is fine. I want to ask desperately, can we make it a priority to send out some kind of piece on the role of the survey as best we can? Because I'm going to have to go back and correct this now as best I can. And if that's not possible to correct it, I wanted to just put out there, because I'm sure I'm not the only one that has confused this or have had bad information. And so if we can't go back and correct it, like my home group's already voted, with the understanding that those blue ones were informational purposes, not some kind of matrix for priority. If we can't go back, I would ask the World Board and the RDs to keep in mind that there may be a lot of people that were confused on how to efficiently use the survey. So if there's any chance we could get something out, it would greatly help our job here. And that's all. And I want to thank you guys always. And we also recognize that COVID screwed everything up, and we're adapting, and we're going to be okay. We're going to get through this survey, no survey. We'll be fine. We're not going to miss the woman's pamphlet. I know that's a big concern, but that's all. That's my request. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Billy. I haven't seen you since you spoke at Marlikna in January 2020, which I really enjoyed. I've listened to that a few times. It's great. We have a board meeting next week, and one of the things we're talking about is what have we heard at CARCAT workshops? Well, it's one of the first ones. There's at least 3 board members on here. Absolutely, we're going to pass that information on. And I'm hearing, and I know Hamid and Danny were hearing loud and clear about this challenge. It's not just you. And sorry that this wasn't clear. And I can't say what exactly will happen, but I can promise you we'll bring it up and say there's a concern. How do we address this and make sure that the survey results are as accurate as they can be given this information we have.
Okay, motion 31 to approve the project plan for Invest in Our Vision, or IIOV for short.
Let me give a little summary of the motions.
Yeah, can you give a little summary of the motion as we're going through it?
Starting with the future.
That'll might trigger some discussion.
Okay, so I'll give a brief. So I'll give a brief about the project, and then if something comes up, we'll talk about it. So the project is focused on communication, communicating the connection between the pursuit of a vision for NA service and the concept of self-support. The goal is to raise understanding of so when COVID hit, we were hit with a huge, you know, our income stream basically halted. And basically we started talking about the future, and we started talking about sustainability of the WSC. And it is a pursuit of a vision for NA service and the concept of self-support. And the goal is to raise understanding of and the commitment, and you know, to the need to contribute both time and resources to NA. And when we say, you know, time and resources, we're not just saying money, we're saying everything. So time, service, you know, all the things that we do, our time here now, this is also you know, contributing to that. And NA World Services in particular. So it's been this has been a focus of the business plan group for the past cycle. And that group would form the work group for this cycle as well, for this project. Some of the project goals include generating ideas to help members basically better understand the work fellowship contributions help to fund, reaching out to, you know, we're reaching out to current contributors to get ideas of what made them contribute. We were setting goals for the fellowship contributions as a, you know, proportion of NAWS income. And all in all, it's about raising awareness of the importance of recurring contributions as the most stable and sustainable income for NAWS, instead of depending on literature sales. So did I forget anything? I know that Jack is also part of the business group. I know Mary Banner is as well. Is there anything I forgot about this, Jack?
No, that sounded great.
Thank you. We had a request from the room to go back to motion 30, just with a brief little explanation.
All right. Well, you know, I meant to thank, I don't think we did this at the beginning, the people who put this together. And, you know, Brenda, thanks for all your communication. And you'll be happy to know I've got a little bit of PowerPoint for you now. We have one that we think will work. I know this is being recorded, so I do want to note for the record, these are non-copy edited rough draft PowerPoints. So please allow us the opportunity, allow us the grace to know there could be a small mistake or two, but we figured it was better to use them knowing they're likely correct. I glanced at them, they seemed fine, but we haven't actually released the PowerPoints because they're still being reviewed. But I thought for the budget it'd be useful. So let me pull this up. Those of you there, you should be able to see this on the screen. Can you guys see that on your screen now?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay. All right. I know online we can. All right. So 2023-25 proposed budget. There's a long cover essay. There's information about the proposed budget. And maybe the most important thing, if you have specific questions that we either can't answer or beyond the scope of the budget, please email wb@na.org. So this budget covers 2 fiscal years. A fiscal year, just for people who may not know, there are calendar years, which is January through December. And a fiscal year is when an entity chooses for business or tax purposes a 12-month period that starts in something other than January. In the case of NA World Services, our fiscal year runs July 1st through June 30th. So if the motions to adopt a 3-year cycle are approved, there will be an additional 1-year budget offered at an interim WSC. So some key accounting principles for those of you that may not know on the budget. It's best guesses based on educated guesses of what our income will be and what money we're going to spend for all of the NAWS offices around the world. These are based on our past experience, what we think we know about the future. That's a little, you know, the future is a little less certain in a post-COVID world than it was before, meaning some of the metrics we used to use haven't proved as reliable as they historically did post-COVID. The budget does also include actual, so not projected, but actual income and expense figures for 2021 and 2022, as well as the projected expenses for the next 2 fiscal years, 2023 and 2024. So figures for 2021 and 22 show excess revenue of about over 3 million and fellowship contributions of nearly 2 million. This income was used to rebuild reserves after the pandemic and to offset future expenses, including the upcoming WSC and some really essential upgrades to our IT and financial infrastructure, meaning accounting and other IT software to improve our efficiencies. While production and service delivery costs, so that means the cost of creating goods as well as the cost of getting them from NA World Services to members, offices, region zones, groups, continues. We are committed to trying to be affordable and to stay as affordable as we can. So we learned a lot in the pandemic. There were a number of financial challenges. Most of you know our income dropped about 90% in March to April of 2020. This budget involves evaluating our previous financial experience, but also considering the global economic situation. There are still significant supply chain issues. Paper is very expensive. We consistently see an inability to get inventory.
Recording stopped.
In the timelines that we used to get them.
Recording in progress.
So that's a reality. Our demand for services absolutely continues to exceed our income. This budget projects a deficit for next year, but not over the entire 2-year cycle. And whenever you've got a nonprofit like ours, you know, with probably, I don't know, 7 billion people on the planet, so probably hundreds of millions of people could use our message. Our resources are finite, but the need really is, I don't know about infinite, but the need is immense, probably is infinite from the perspective we're sitting in. So understanding, you know, what we're trying to do, who we're trying to reach with relatively small numbers, I mean, with an annual budget of the $8, $9, $10 million expense range, a third of that is based on the cost of goods of delivering literature and literature related things. We're trying to do an awful lot with very little, for sure. So this budget has 3 kinds of expenses. Our fixed operational expenses, so that'd be things like rent, phones, payroll. Variable operations, those are things that are minimal in the upcoming cycle, but those are numbers that could deviate. And a reserve for unexpected costs. And when you see the point where there's a surplus, like we talked about, there was a surplus in the last cycle. Well, yeah, more than half of our budget is special workers, and you know, almost half of them we didn't bring back. So meaning, while there is somewhat an illusion of some extra resources, that doesn't take into account necessarily what was budgeted and what was done to stay financially solvent during the pandemic. Fixed operational costs are really 4 primary categories. Accounting, which is audits, other professional services, probably including legal. Personnel, which is payments to special workers. That it would include the taxes we pay to have them, health insurance, other expenses. Overhead, that's facility, equipment leases, things like our printers, expenses in the building, and IT costs and technology. So overhead and personnel obviously were greatly reduced in the last cycle to survive the pandemic. Absent that, we would have not been able to keep the doors open. We had to make some pretty drastic draconian moves in order to stay afloat and be able to, you know, send out books and respond to requests for help with services. So fixed operational costs are divided among 4 activity areas: literature production and distribution, fellowship development, World Service Conference, and events. Now, these are broad overarching categories. And for example, I think somebody mentioned earlier, WSC is 22%. That's not the cost of the conference itself. That's the cost of the conference along with things approved by the conference, as well as the World Board. The same would apply with fellowship development. Literature production and distribution probably most naturally matches what people would think of in a typical balance sheet or income statement, meaning these are the costs directly associated with producing and distributing literature, whether that's importing it, manufacturing it domestically, by domestic I mean in the United States, and getting that literature distributed out. Events are, that would be things like the World Convention, which is coming up in BC in 24. So this motion is to approve the 2023-2025 Narcotics Anonymous World Services, Inc. budget. And I hope you found our first sharing of that slideshow somewhat useful in doing this. I see somebody asked it. I don't know if it'll be ready tomorrow. Hopefully, they're trying to get it done today. You're the first group that have seen it. So with that, Ahmed and I are ready for questions.
You have a question, Kelly, or was that just it telling me to unmute myself?
No, actually, I was, yeah, just letting you know we couldn't hear you. So, Jack, it's probably in there somewhere deep within the survey or the essay. But if the motion to extend to a 3-year conference, how will we approve a budget past 25?
Yeah, absolutely. That is in there. And what will happen is that year would be approved at the interim WSC. So part of that proposal for a 3-year cycle includes an interim virtual World Service Conference. So that year would be decided on at that conference.
And that would just be a 1-year budget, or would that be a, okay.
Correct. It would be sort of an addition. It would be an expansion of this cycle's budget. Exactly.
Right. And then at the 26th conference, we'd be approving a 3-year budget.
If a 3-year cycle were approved, I would think that's logical. I'm not certain of that, but I don't know why we wouldn't do that. Yeah.
Okay.
I reserve the right to be mistaken if there is something in our bylaws or otherwise that requires a semi-annual. So that I don't think that exists, but I hesitate to give you a definitive answer without researching that.
Thank you. Over.
Kelly, you always sound so good. It makes me want to date you. So you just sound like your voice sounds so damn good.
Oh yeah.
Well, not when you say roll tide. You leave that out. But.
Yeah.
Hey, my name's Tim and I'm an addict. One, kudos for reaching out back. I was curious, is the NA way on the table to ever come back? Since you were talking about budget items?
The answer is yes, that discussion is going on. We recently brought back, what was it, Hamid, reaching out? Am I correct?
Yeah, reaching out is here.
Yeah, exactly. The answer to that is yes, but that's likely based on maybe discussions at the conference within the board, what priorities are, but certainly no one has ever said in a board meeting or indicated the NA way is dead, so to speak. So I don't, but as to the timeline of that, I don't know. I would say if you want a definitive answer, because I don't have it, email wb@na.org, but I'm very comfortable saying, and Hamid, correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't heard anything to suggest that we have permanently recommended removing that as a resource.
No, we haven't.
And I can't imagine the board would do that without direction from the conference or discussion.
Well, I know we're without an editor permanently, so that can be replaced. So thank you.
The reaching out was pretty good. You know, I think that was identified as a higher priority, and I know it was well received. It seemed like a really good issue.
Yeah, I was very excited to see that back in publication.
Yeah.
So thank you.
All right, I think that's it with the budget. How about motion 33 then?
Okay, so motion 33 is, so motion 33, 34, 35 will be process motions, and it is to use the following terminology to describe straw poll and vote outcomes for WSC 2023 only. And the intent is to simplify the terminology to describe voting and polling outcomes and make it less potentially confusing. Should I go through like all the process and then discuss, or one by one? Okay, let's go one by one.
Okay.
Okay, I don't see any questions, but we can always go back. Motion 34, also for WSC 2023 only. If a participant appeals a decision of the co-facilitator, the co-facilitator will explain why they ruled as they did. The participant making the appeal will explain why they are appealing the ruling, and then the body will vote. The voting threshold required to uphold the decision of the co-factor appeal will be 50% plus 1 in favor of the co-fact. The intent is to clearly define the process for a participant to appeal the chair, thus maintaining checks and balances.
There's a question here. Matt?
If I remember correctly, previously the threshold on an appeal to decision was a 60% to uphold the decision. Is there a reason that that was lowered in this? What was the thinking behind that?
I think Jack would be better answering. Could you, Jack?
Sure. Honestly, Matt, I don't know. And the reason I say that is these were the co-facilitators can't make motions. So part of their scope is to try to improve decision-making at the conference. So they came to the board with some suggestions, motions 33, 34, 35. So I understand they aren't here. I don't recall a discussion of why this was what was adopted. I do know that this originated with ideas from the co-facilitators as to what would create efficiencies, and the board is putting them forward because we are supporting what they recommend to try. Yeah, so I don't know much more than that, and and I would hate, yeah, and they're not here to talk about it particularly anyway. But I would say if you wanted an answer to that, that would be a perfect WB at NA.org, because I imagine somebody involved in that would give you an answer, and I just don't have it.
Yeah, Steve could give. He was part of the discussion with them.
Okay, thank you. Over.
Thank you, Matt. Okay. No more questions. Okay, motion 35, to eliminate abstentions when voting or taking straw polls. This is also for 2023 only. The intent is to simplify the voting and polling process and eliminate an option that has the same effect as a no vote.
Any questions? Okay, no questions. Yes, we have a question here.
Can we go
One
back to
second, Rob.
35 for a second? Can we go back to motion 35 for a second?
Yeah, sure.
So how are you going to eliminate abstentions? You either vote yes or no, one way or the other. The choice won't be an abstention, right?
Present not voting as well.
Present not voting, okay. All right, I see.
Okay, motion 36, to adopt for WSC 2023 only as well, the following approaches for new idea discussion. So changes from the 2018 process described in GWSNA are shown in red, and I don't know if I can't show it here. So can we show like,
Yeah, I'll give you a host. I'm on co-host.
yeah, so, basically they're like, so we've added, electronically, for the makers of new proposals. And that's because we anticipate a hybrid. We've striked out D of one. All these strikeouts are removed. And it's basically housekeeping. Do we have any questions?
Thank you. Wolverine?
Oh, you know what? I might be looking in the wrong place. I was looking at what's listed as motion 53 from 2018 about eliminating new business proposals. And I don't think we're even up to that point. I'm sorry. Am I incorrect with that? Is motion 35 the last one?
No, we're on motion 36.
Okay, so is this one too for eliminating the new ideas portion?
No, we're not eliminating the new ideas. We're proposing new changes to for the new ideas. No, yeah, it's a lot of housekeeping. So we're adding electronically, which I think you're looking at the wrong one, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
This year's.
Yeah. Starts on page 4 and ends on page 5.
all right, you know what? Let me remove my question and let people go forward till we get to that point.
Okay.
Patricia?
Hello, everyone. I'm recovering addict. My name's Patricia. I am the RD for C&P. And I'm a little confused. Please help me. You're talking about motion 26, 36 of what?
We're talking motion 36 of the cat.
Oh, of the cat. Okay, I apologize. Okay, I'm not looking at the cat. Thank you so much. I apologize.
Any other questions?
Okay, motion 37 to adopt the 2023-25 reimbursement policy.
Ahmed, on this one, I've got a couple slides that'll work.
Okay, good.
I will throw them up. Hang on 1 second. And I can throw those up for you. The current slide. Oh, no. I thought I've almost got it.
Yeah, it's okay. No worries.
Okay. It's all right. There we go. All right. Current slide. Perfect. All right. Here we go. There you are.
Okay, so this is the revision to the reimbursement policy. And so basically it's a lot of housekeeping, and we've added some expenses. So I think we've increased the per diem. I think it was 60, if I'm not mistaken, to 70. We've also added, like, we've removed like the super shuttle from that. And is there anything else I'm missing, like parking?
No, I think you got it.
Yeah, it was a lot of housekeeping, and we've increased the per diem, I think. We increased it by 10, right? But it was 60 before.
It was 60 or 55. Actually, I can look it up. I don't recall, but I know we.
Yeah, it's okay, but we've increased it to be 70.
We lost your slides, Jack, if.
Oh, I took him down. I can put him back.
Okay.
Yeah, that
No
was,
problem.
there it is.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Okay.
Okay, I think, was that it? I think that's it.
We had a request to go back to 31.
31, sure. Let me see. What was 31? 31. To approve the IIOV.
Pam has a question.
Yeah, sure.
Who's going to be in that work group?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question. Sorry.
Who's gonna be in the work group?
I'm really sorry. I still didn't hear it because there's a lot of echo.
I could answer if you like, because I heard the question. Would you mind?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, hi, Irene Addict. Nice to see you guys. Yeah, it's the business plan group that's already established is the work group for that.
Who's in that?
There's a few board members. There's some former board members. There's let's see, how many people are in it? Mary's on here. She's on it. We have, I believe, the 8 or 9 members from people with business backgrounds, account backgrounds. Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, I think we're about 8 or 9.
The executive committee, Ron Hofius and myself. Anthony and Becky also.
Okay, Wolvina.
Hi, everyone. So pursuant to new idea proposals, will there be space, is the World Board planning for space at this conference for any new idea proposals to be discussed? Or a format for that, or you guys are kind of just putting that forward for the next 3-year conference? Will this conference have any opportunities to either revisit new idea proposals made in 2018 or to have any space at this conference? And has the World Board considered that?
You want me to take that, Hamid?
Yeah, please, could you?
Yeah, currently the plan is to use these procedures at the 2023 World Service Conference. The only variable, Wolvina, is what I've been saying. We're very challenged this conference of understanding what it'll look like with the things that we must do and the hybrid element. But certainly the plan is now to have a new business idea session discussion similar to what we had in 2018. You want to add anything to that, Irene? But I believe that's exactly where our plans are at this point.
Yep. That's what I see too.
And I'm going to take this moment to say, I'll see a bunch of you this evening. I'm going to go off to my doctor now. Thank you, Irene, for stepping in and covering with Mohammed while I get to the doctor. And it's good to see so many familiar faces. And thanks for making that CAT workshop really pretty pleasant. So I'll see you all soon.
Thank you, Jack. Matt.
While we have a bit of a lull, and I was hoping to catch Jack here when he was doing this, one thing I haven't had an opportunity to do that I was reminded since the executive committee and the business plan work groups were brought up is I wanted to really highlight the board and the way the working of the South Florida car motion and the way we were able to dispose of that without being in the car. And I really wanted to just kind of publicly thank the board for the way that that was handled and for essentially finding a way to, give the spirit of the motion a reality without having to go through dragging everything through the car in the World Service Conference. So I just wanted to say I really appreciated that. And I hope that type of thing going forward becomes more of a norm. And you guys are awesome for the way that you handled that. Thank you.
Thank you. Very much appreciated.
Are there any other questions?
I have a question, but it just got.
1 second, we have one here.
My name is Brenda and I'm an addict. I just had a quick question as we were talking about the different ways to look at voting. I remember hearing on a CP meeting that there was going to be a new way for us to vote, or that NAWS was looking at a different electronic system. So I was just wondering if there was anything more on that.
Well, we're trying to, basically the concept will remain the same. However, the clickers that we previously used, the company no longer exists. So we're looking at a different way for that. But process-wise, they will be the same, except, process-wise will remain the same.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have to be on the phone.
Any other questions? So if we have no other questions, we will break and then come back at 1 o'clock with regional motions. If we have nothing more for the CAT.
Yeah, we have no more CAT. We're done with the CAT. Great session, guys.